Well, good morning. This is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic, and I want to thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking about the closer connection test, and very quickly, I'm going to get a summary of what it is and what we're going to be talking about today. So the closer connection test is a test for U.S. tax purpose used to determine whether or not you can meet the substantial present test and still be treated as a non-resident alien for tax purposes. This means not being subject to worldwide taxation. To qualify for the closer connection exemption, an individual must meet the three conditions. One, be present in the United States for fewer than 183 days during the current year. Two, maintain a tax home in a foreign country during the current year. And three, have a closer connection to that foreign country than to the United States. The closer connection is established by demonstrating that the individual has more significant contacts with a foreign country than the United States. Factors considered include the location of the individual's permanent home, family, personal belongings, social and political ties, banking activities, business activities, driver's license jurisdiction, and voter registrations. The individual must file Form 8840, Closer Connection Exception Statement, to claim this exemption. The test is based on all facts and circumstances. The IRS and courts will look to various indicators of personal and economic connections to determine the closer connection. For example, an alien who is official of a recognized foreign country with an A visa would normally have a closer connection to that country than to the United States. And so your visa status really comes into it. So with that introduction, I want to also introduce our great guest, John Richardson of Citizenship Solutions. He has prepared a slides today to go a little bit more in depth to what this summary is, along with Keith Redmond, advocate to and consulate to the American abroad. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Keith, I got a question for you as we start off. Is this something now you are the lay person in consulate to the American abroad. Is this something that comes up in your conversations when people ask questions? Because I think the question that comes up, honestly, is where this is important, is that oftentimes we talk to people who want to renounce and they say, well, hey, look, I might have some parents back home in the U.S. that I may have to take care of at some point, and I don't know if I could do that. Does this come up? Does this issue come up for a lot of your people overseas, wondering if they could kind of, still renounce, but maybe get back in the U.S.? Does this come up at all?
Yeah, it does. And I think the issue comes up is, how many days can one spend in the United States that is, I guess, at the loss of any other way of saying it, not taxable, So because, I deal with a lot of people who either want to renounce or don't want to renounce, but the common thread is that they need to, because of elderly parents, let's say, and that's been my situation, they have to spend a significant amount of time in the U.S., but how does that affect any type of tax filing, even though that formally one is let's say a fiscal resident of France, where everything is there. Now, this thing that you guys are going to be talking about today, I did not know about this whatsoever. So I don't know how that plays into an American overseas who needs to come to the U.S. for a length of time. But yes, it does come up.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, all right. So we'll hopefully answer some of that. And John, good morning to you, John. Nice to see you. And I know there was a case, wasn't there a recent case where, wasn't there a case last year that an FBAR penalty couldn't be assessed because a person was actually non-resident? Or am I confusing cases?
They're part of the same family, but yeah, you're confusing the case. Okay. This was a green card holder. Not being and that was because of the interaction of the tax treaty. This is completely independent.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. But the point being that if you do qualify, you don't need to file an FBAR.
The point being that it's like the way I put in the presentation today. 1 minute you're a tax resident, and then poof, like magic, I'm closer connection. You're not.
That was a beautiful segue. That is teamwork. All right.
You'd use the treaty if you were a tax resident. That's a separate discussion.
Okay. So this is not related to treaties whatsoever. No. You don't need to have a treaty.
That's one of the great things about it. I mean, this is an absolute. I'm not a tax resident, but what's so incredible about it is it applies once under the U.S. substantial. They've already decided you're a tax resident. So yes, you're a tax resident, but poof, you're not going to be a tax resident.
All right.
This is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
All right, let's get into it then. This
I mean,
this is gonna be great.
This is so exciting, isn't it, Anthony?
Magically, the magic wand. One day your tax was.
I mean,
All
this
right,
is like
I got it.
the grail in life to not be a U.S. tax resident, right? And imagine this is accomplished just by filing a form.
Oh, I love it. The Forbes imprison us, but I guess they also can offer us our salvation too. There you go. So here we go. All right, so let's get
action we trust.
All right, so here we have to start off with what a non-resident alien, and which is always, I always love this one because it's such an egocentric or American empire-centric definition. Well, a non-resident alien is somebody who's not a U.S. person, who doesn't live in the U.S., like the rest of the world, right? Wouldn't that be a way to say it, John?
Non-resident aliens are the only carbon life forms on the planet that, unless they have U.S. source income, are not subject to the U.S. tax, form, and penalty regime.
There you go. That's what you want to be.
I mean, that's what people want to be in life in the 20th.
You want to be I want to aspire to be a non-resident alien. That's right. So here we got your definitions of what a non-resident alien is.
What this is about. So we always remember, Anthony, we on this channel we do things that are unheard of in the world. We start with the law, and we actually look at what the statute says. I mean, this is just
I know
revolutionary, right?
And sometimes we read the instructions too. It's this crazy things we do. I know we're way out there. We're way out there, right?
No, just stick with the law and the regs. You're much better off. But anyway, so obviously, if we go back what the Internal Revenue Code says, right? And this is, everybody should close their eyes and just imagine the implications of this, right? So what the Internal Revenue Code says in Section 1 is that all individuals are U.S. tax subjects and therefore subject to U.S. tax, form, penalties, and regulate. All individuals in the world. All. A-L-L. Got it? But then, the way everything works in the U.S., we have a carve-out. And the carve-out is, I think it's in Section 2 of the Internal Revenue Code. It says, unless you're a non-resident alien, right? So everybody wants to be a non-resident alien, right?
Right. And so you could really call, any of your friends around the world and other countries, the U.S., you could just tell them, hey, look, the U.S. tax code exempts you from taxation. Just let them know, hey, look, you're subject to it, but you're also exempted. It's really something else.
It's a great. Right. All right. So what this 7701B says, okay, it's really a section that defines when a non-resident alien, poof, magically
disappears.
U.S. tax resident, and we know some of the stuff, right? So we know that, of course, citizens, no way out, right? U.S. citizens, lock, stock, and barrel, and they're available to be punished and milked for anything they want.
Anything, yeah.
Now, green card holders since the 1st of January 1984 are treated almost as abusively as citizens, almost, but not quite, okay? So the final way to become a U.S. tax resident, though, and this is true in most places of the world, you just spend too much time there, right? So, you spend 183 days a year in Canada, you're going to be a tax resident no matter what you say. I don't really live here. Yeah, I spent 185 days here, but I don't live here. Get lost. They'll say, well, we don't actually care at this point whether you live here or not. Point is, you've been here enough times, so you're a tax, right? Now, the U.S. has a similar provision, and it's called the substantial presence test. Okay, so so maybe go to the next slide. So what the substantial presence test does, it's essentially like Canada's 183-day test or whatever. It says, if you spend enough days in the U.S., you are a tax resident, okay? But the way they do it, see, the U.S. can't do anything simply, okay? It always has to be, you always have to pay a lawyer or an accountant to know, right? And keep lots of records, because what they do is they use basically a weighted average over 3 years. Go to the next slide. Here's the weighted average.
Yeah, right. This is the slide. This is a valuable slide, folks. This is the money slide.
Yeah, I think that slide, Anthony, I think what you should do after this is send this off to all the airport authorities. What is it? The FAA, federal, whoever, and you tell them that they should replace "Welcome to America" signs with that slide right there. Okay, and then you can put your ad at the bottom, courtesy of Anthony of IRS Med.
Here you go.
Right. This advertising worldwide, but here's how it works. So you're worried about spending too much time in the good old USA, and I think that should be a concern. First of all, you have to spend more than 31 days in any given year. Okay. So, I mean, that's a good thing. Just make sure you're out, you scamper out. But assuming you do, because this does apply to a lot of people. Then the way it works is you do a weighted average. You add up the number of days in the current year plus a third of the days in the preceding year and a sixth of days before that. So let's take a very simple example, okay? Now, this is 2024, right? All right, well, let's say we want to know whether for 2023, okay, you were a U.S. tax resident. Well, first thing you do is you look at 2020, say, did I spend more than 31 days there, yes or no? So the answer is yes. It's the only reason you'd be concerned. You say, well, how many? You say, well, I spent 120 days. So the first thing we do is we take out a piece of paper and we write out 120. Then what we do is we go back to the 2022 year and we ask, how many days were you president in the United States? Okay. And let's say that it was still 120. Okay. Because every day, every year you go for 120 days exactly, because you can't do math. You don't want to worry about this, right? So then you paid a lawyer $500 to divide 3 into 120. And, this would be a new thing for you to get into. Okay, the arithmetic.
You're killing me. You're killing me.
So then what you do is you go back the year before that. And remember, we only spent 120 days in the U.S. because that's the only number that we can work with, right?
Right.
So then we go back to 1/6. So 1/6. So the question is, what number times 6 equals 1? And it's 20. So now what we do is then we have to go. So we've had the lawyer now help us with these numbers, 120 plus 40.
Some fractions are involved here, so it's probably going to be a more pricey attorney. There's fractions.
Exactly, but now we go to the accountant to add them up, okay? And I would not even trust a non-licensed person like Keith. I'm sorry, I would not trust you to add these numbers, okay? Sorry about that. We need to go to KPMG for this one. Okay, and we're at 120. Plus 40, I think that's 160.
Okay.
Not the reason anybody goes to law school, Anthony, is because we can't do
it.
And we're at 180.
Okay.
And then we're sitting there. Some people wait in anticipation to find out if their offspring is going to be a boy or a girl. But for these people, they wait in anticipation to know what the numbers add up to. And it's 180. So they say, I'm safe. I'm still a non-resident alien. I'm so happy. All right. But let's say somebody says, well, we're going to spend, say, 130 days in the U.S. every year. Now you're going to trip the wire. Are you with me?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, whoa. Wait, 120 a day, I'm fine. But 130, whoa, okay.
That's actually a good rule of thumb, everybody. Don't spend more than 120 days, okay?
Okay.
All right, now.
Unless, as we get to this, right?
Now, okay, it gets better. Okay. So now we go to 130 days, or say 140, okay? Because that's a number that's easily dividable by 2, and by, et cetera. So 140 days. So now what we do is the diagnosis from KPMG comes back.
Okay.
You're a tax resident. You're a tax resident. Welcome to the world's premier tax form and penalty club. Now understand what that means. Understand what that means. That means that not only do you have to pay tax on your worldwide income, but if you don't file your FBARs, if you do not file your 5471s, 3520, if you do not report every aspect of your life outside the United States, they can bankrupt you, right?
Right.
I have to stop you here. John, I got to stop you here because this is a question that does come up, and it even comes up for me. I'll use myself as an example. All right. I'm living in France. All right. And I decide to go to the United States I'll keep it very simple, go to the United States for 4 months, and then I return back to France. How is the IRS going to know that I spent 4 months that particular year in the United States? I filed my French tax return. I filed my U.S. tax return. How are they going to know it? That's where I'm confused.
I don't know how they know. Maybe they don't know it.
Okay. Well,
Shall
that's
we
where I'm
stop the
confused.
podcast?
What's that?
Shall we stop the podcast? I don't know.
No. I just a logigical question. Is it
Well,
voluntary
I mean,
information?
all U.S. tax. I mean, all of these problems are solved. If they don't, apply to you, or if you, take steps not to apply or whatever. I don't know.
Well, no. I'm just asking. I mean,
Look,
do
it's
you have
getting.
the
I
voluntary
don't know the
information?
answer to that, but what I
Yeah,
do.
Keith, I think I could answer your question. Again, there's really not. There's not a lot of databases that people have. And, here's a great example. This one always cracks me up. People will file, married, or hey, we're married. We can file married filing joint now. Well, just understand, there's no database of all the marriages in the world. So when you file your marriage, you claim your marriage. The only way for the IRS to figure out that you're not married is to conduct a field audit, and then the examiner would have to know enough to say, "Wait a second, these people don't seem like they're married. Let me go check to see if there's no marriage certificate for this couple nowhere in the world." So again, here, this is just where your honesty, right? It's a situation. The U.S. tax code is where you're always punished, where you're nearly always punished for your honesty. So I think that's really the answer, Keith. And so, we create these elaborate rules that will always benefit the people who won't follow them. Meanwhile, it will trip up the honest American who wants to do the right thing. And that's really the problem that we have.
That's true. But listen, Keith,
wondering if there was a mechanism there.
Well, there is via U.S. and Canada.
Okay. Is there? Okay, I did not know that.
Track of, as you go back and forth, right?
Okay.
There actually is that mechanism. So the question is not, is there a mechanism? The question is whether anybody would bother to get into it, But I mean, but there is the mechanism between the U.S. and Canada, and that's significant because Canadians are I think, the prime beneficiaries of this, and I'll get to this in a minute.
Okay.
But look, there's a difference. I think it's important to understand the structure of this stuff, regardless of what you do or don't do with it, right?
Oh, I agree. It was just a question.
In any case, here we go. Now, this is what's interesting, right? So all of a sudden, you're a U.S. tax resident. Okay. That is bad news. Okay. That's like a seriously bad diagnosis for somebody.
It's getting the worst news. It's getting the worst news.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, anything that can be worse. Well, actually, not entirely. Not entirely. I can give you examples where it would be good to be a U.S. tax resident when we want dual tax residency to opt out of somebody else's horror for a treaty. All this is so circumstantial. Maybe sometimes you want this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Imagine, I'm just making this up, although I could imagine a situation like this. You've got a huge tax bill coming in one country. You say, well, maybe I can tie break out if I can become a tax resident of the U.S. or something, right? So, believe me, it's worth paying people who understand this stuff, okay? For a certain group of people. All right. In other words, it's like there's saying one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter. Well, one person's horror at being a U.S. tax resident might be somebody else's salvation. Okay.
It's definitely possible. Yep.
Depending, yeah.
All right. So maybe this. All right. So now, let's do the 140 days here. So what happens with 140 days?
Well, we start with 140, right?
Yep.
Okay, then what we do is we take a third of 140, which is, what is that, Anthony?
That's going to be what, close to
It's
40,
going to be about
38 or something like that. Is that what it is?
48, isn't it?
It'll be like, yeah, around 40, because 4
48.
times
Yes.
it'll be 38, right? Something like that. Somewhere 36.
Well, what's a third of 140? Okay, it's higher than 40, right? So we take 40 and then we add a third of 20, right? Which is about 7. So it's about 47, right?
Okay. All right.
Not bad for somebody who's a lawyer.
Not bad. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I see. Yeah. You should be charging
Keep it
a
in my
lot.
head, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You should be increasing your billable rate, John. Yeah.
Hey, in the modern world, I don't know how many people could do that in their head anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, so here we go. 140 plus. Now, can we do this together? 140 plus 47. How much is that?
140 plus 47, 187.
Oh my God. Good news or bad news?
That doesn't sound like good news, because we're over
183, aren't we?
Whoa. And we didn't even add in the previous year.
I know, we didn't even need the previous year. Look at that. Huh?
Whoa. So now when this happens, is this a situation where you refund the client their money back, even though you didn't need to calculate it? You just are like, well, look,
only if you made an arithmetic error.
Okay. So, because I'm just thinking, because seems like they would be entitled to a return of a third of their fee, because you didn't do the last math, but you're kind of set up for it, right?
Oh, okay. So then you add another paragraph saying, and by the way, if we calculated 1/6 of 140, it would be worse. But okay.
Okay. All right. So that's how you keep your fee. Make sure you keep your fee.
I guess so. All right. So now look. So now understand what's just happened here. Okay. Understand. You are a U.S. tax resident, right? Whether anybody knows about it or not. You are a U.S. tax resident. Now, what's amazing about this, you notice we have the word below the chart. It starts with exception.
Yep.
Okay. Now, what this says, so the exception, where the individual is present in the United States during less than 1/2 of the current year. So if in the year we're talking about, you are there for 183 days, you're not going to be able to use this. You got to be 182, I think, right? All right. So that's the first thing. Okay. In other words, you can't spend the full year and run it up, right? So, and a closer connection to a foreign country is established, right? So these are the two things. Now, notice what this says, exception. Now that means, poof, you're not a tax resident. See that? 1 minute you're a tax resident, but then poof, here it is, the carve out.
So essentially,
means you're not a tax resident. It doesn't mean you're a tax resident, but it means you're not a tax resident. Isn't that fantastic?
That's fantastic. So now this is the thing here. This is really my concern for the legal market, is that if someone is using this closer connection test, really this math fee generation, as we would say, as we really this math kind of goes away, because we're just sort of stuck with, hey, look, are you more for 183 days? That's just basic comparison of that's just what number is higher than lower. So do you offer a discount fee on that?
Well, you could send somebody H&R Block, okay, for that type of thing, right? KPMG. I mean, there's varying levels of computational competence, right? Okay. Now,
right.
The question, now again, this is so critical to understand here, because this is different from treaty tiebreakers. This is so critical to understand, is the effect of this is that you're not a tax resident even when you really are. It's like Alice in Wonderland.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm a tax resident, but I'm not.
Amazing.
This is weird.
Okay, now, before we go further, let's pause for a minute and give this context, right? So what we're about to learn is how somebody who spends an awful lot of time hanging out in the U.S., but has a closer connection to another country, is not going to be treated as a U.S. tax resident. Keith,
yes,
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you know of any group of people that spend no time in the U.S., have a clear closer connection to another country, but don't have this benefit, and they're still always treated as U.S. tax residents. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
It kind of rings a bell. Yeah.
Well, just in case somebody's joining right now, who would that group be?
Oh, geez. Americans living outside the United
There you
States.
go.
So this is incredible, right?
Right. Yeah.
So Americans living outside the United States are punished because of citizenship taxation. But notice that this can be used only by non-citizens.
Yeah.
So here we have
Yeah.
citizenship taxation. We go after these damn Americans who escaped and are living outside the United States, but we're going to use citizenship non-taxation to reward people who are not U.S. citizens, right? How cool is that?
So does that mean that it's best to just renounce your U.S. citizenship? It's more advantageous.
There's no question. Well, in many cases, that is true. I mean, I can think of exceptions, but in many cases, the point is simply this: that for anybody who thinks that the citizenship doesn't matter in tax, you are wrong. Because what we haven't, we've talked about, without calling it this, citizenship non-taxation. Here's another example. The dual citizenship exemption of the exit tax rules, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's as though, from the U.S. point of view, the absolute worst type of carbon life form you can be is a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, and this is always, John, and this is kind of where we're supposed to have, and this is one of the reasons why we say this, the real Constitution of the United States of America is its tax code, and whatever kind of spawn comes from that, because this is clearly a violation, of the due process or equal protection that's contained in the due process clause of the U.S. Constitution. I mean, and I was just sort of trying to think of this morning, and maybe we'll have to do a special podcast on this, on the examples of when you are discriminated based on your nationality and based on where you're living. And this is, it's and also because your nationality, if you're in a treaty country too, sometimes that can matter. Now, again, treaties, this is something that exists outside of a tax treaty. We don't need to worry about having a tax treaty in this case. We're not using a treaty tiebreaker. This is something else entirely. All right, so we'll get to the next slide. All right, so the closer connection. Here's your next slide, John.
All right. Now, the question is, I find this, I'm probably one of the few people in the world who finds this fascinating, just because I think about tax residency a lot. But first of all, to meet the closer connection requirement here, now, here's the first thing I find fascinating, is you don't have to actually be a tax resident of the other country. I mean, most times
What?
you are.
What?
Say that again.
I will say it again.
What?
Look at the Internal Revenue Code. All right. There is no requirement of having to be a tax resident of the other country. Now, most times people will.
Right.
But interestingly, there's no requirement. Now, notice that if they're not a tax resident of the other, you couldn't use a treaty tie break, right? But we can save that for another podcast. But this is really amazing, right? I think. You don't have to be a tax resident. Now, the next thing that is interesting is, now they use this to determine this. Now, I emphasize again that in most cases, people are going to be tax residents, but I find it interesting that it's not a requirement here. Then they get into a bunch of stuff, okay? This idea of a tax home. All right. What does tax home mean? It means basically if you were deducting travel expenses, where would be your starting point or something like that. But I mean, clearly what it means is that you've got to have some kind of a connection, some kind of a stake in the ground there. That's for sure, right? No question. Now, notice that doesn't say tax resident, though.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It says tax home, which is the term of art, and it does not mean tax resident, right? And that's the key point there.
Now,
and I think,
by the way, Americans abroad have a tax home in another country, don't they? Okay, but somehow they're out of this, right? Okay, if they want to use the foreign earned income, notice it even references the foreign earned income exclusion exception 911, right?
That's right. Oh,
then
man.
they say closer connection. Now that is not defined in the Internal Revenue Code. That's sort of defined or tried to be defined. The no one factor in the regs. Now, and in the form itself. Okay. So now let's ask ourselves, what would it mean to have a closer connection? So next. All right. Oh, before we get there, remember we have a carve out to the carve out, right? I mean, it's just one carve out to the next carve out. Now, this is quite interesting because you cannot use this if you're trying to get a green card. Okay, basically, in summary. So, this is interesting, right? Because it sort of, feeds into the whole idea of defining tax residency in terms of status, who you are. You want a green card? Nah, you can't benefit from this. We don't care if no. Anyway, moving on. The exception. Isn't this hilarious?
This is really one of the most entertaining ever. This is just right. It's just.
I mean, I don't know of any other country that that says, "Well, you are a tax resident, but we're going to let you off." I mean, it's this madness. Imagine you went to the Canada Revenue Agency. It's, well, I spent 185 days in Canada. I really like it there. But listen, I really want to tell you that I have a closer connection in the United States. So stop treating me as a tax resident. I mean, this is you can't make this stuff up, Anthony. So here we go. Closer connection. Here's the form. Exception. They're aliens.
This is probably, if I was going to say, as far as attractiveness overall, as IRS forms, this is going to be a 10 out of a 10 for me. This is probably the most attractive, form other than a power of attorney form 2848.
It's a nice form, isn't it?
That is a gorgeous form.
I like it too.
Yeah.
I like it too. Yeah. So anyway, that's what the first part of it looks like. Now, but let's go to the next slide, which shows some of the factors. I don't know. Can you expand it at all? I can't even read it, but
I can. That's why I'm. Yeah. So these are the questions asking significant contacts with foreign countries or countries, and see, these are asking very specific factors and circumstances about proving, like, well, I might bank in this country, but I have a home here. I might do this here. So it's just very, very granular queries here. Let me just get this. I'll go over some here. Where was your family located? Well, what's the definition of a family? Where was your automobile located? Where was your automobile registered? Where are your personal belongings, furniture, etc. located? Where was the bank in which you conducted your routine personal banking activities located? Did you conduct business activities in a location other than your tax home? Where was your driver's license issued? Do you hold a second driver's license? Was it issued? Were you registered? Where were you registered to vote? When completing official documents, forms, what country do you list as your residence? Have you ever completed a form W-8-BEN, W-9, request for taxpayer identification? Any other forms? I'm asking some very, very specific things that make or break your self-certification. I mean, that's really what this is. It's a self-certification that I apply. And then, I have not really, and I haven't looked to see if there's actually a practice unit on this. A practice unit is what the IRS creates to help their examiners figure out how to conduct an audit on a specific issue. Sometimes we don't see these practice. There's a big issue that the tax industry says, "Oh my God, this is a huge issue. This is a huge issue," and then you go to see, well, does the IRS really have a program for this? And then you find out the IRS doesn't have a program for it. And like, well, how are they going to make this a big issue? Because there's no training to get everyone on the same page. And so that's something you have to look at. So I'll look into that. Maybe while you're talking.
Can you imagine the amount of work it would take to have a practice unit on this?
Right. Well, right. You know what? Right. It would take a lot of work the questions are there, but I think this is, well, how do you go about verifying these things?
Exactly.
How would that's like, well,
they're not verifying them. That's the whole point here. You fill out the damn form.
Yeah.
And that's it. Poof, you're not a tax resident.
There you go. Fill out the form.
You're not verifying this stuff.
The magical form.
I wouldn't think. But let me tell you something that is far more interesting to me than the form. Okay. That really, these are the factors that the Canada Revenue Agency actually uses to determine whether somebody's ordinarily resident in Canada. I mean, there's tremendous overlap, right? When people say they've severed, tax residency from Canada. I mean, for listeners, if you want to see what I mean, check out Canada Revenue Agency Form NR73. And it's unbelievable, what the overlap is. But let's pause here for a minute now and just look at where we are contextually.
Yeah, but hold on. This is exactly the point I want to get to because people are joining. Jackson, thank you so much for this comment. Exactly the point is, if you're joining us now, this magical poof, I'm no longer a U.S. tax resident, only applies if you're not a U.S. citizen. Or green card holder. That is, people who are not U.S. citizens get a benefit that you simply are not entitled to. Americans get the worst of the U.S. tax code. People who are not Americans get a break. That is what we're saying, Jackson. So you're absolutely right. And if you're joining us, that's what this is about. You cannot use Form 8840 if you are a U.S. citizen. We are going to talk a little bit about what you can do if you renounce. Can you use 8840? That's what we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, just want to clear that up. Okay, go ahead, John.
Now look, I think it's important before we go further to remind people. Now, Keith asked me a very interesting question a day or two ago on this, and he said to me, "Well, why is this not sort of discussed out in the old? I mean, why is this a surprise to people, right?" And I think to some extent, the answer is this. I think is that the U.S. tax code is so complicated in that people have a tendency to know what rules may be, but have no ability to see them contextually, right? So I want to add the context here. What is shockingly unbelievable about this, right? Now we start from the principle. It's not a question whether these people are tax residents who have this exception. They are U.S. tax residents, or they're not eligible for the exception, right? So here we have, right, people who are U.S. tax residents who are getting a break, an exemption, because they have a closer connection to another country. But yet all U.S. citizens abroad have a closer connection to another country, and they're punished far worse. I mean, this is so abusive to its America is so abusive to its own citizens. I mean, it is unbelievable.
It's like there's a mocking to it involved. Like, not only you're an American person and we're going to jam your face in your Americannesses. And then we're going to pick your head up so that you can look at the person that we're not jamming their face into it. But you're going to get it. You're going to get it. You're bad American.
Anthony, and now we have Democrats abroad trolling for vote, totally disrespecting Americans abroad by ignoring their issues. I mean, it is so disrespectful to American citizens. It is so disrespectful.
It's something. Go ahead, Keith. You got some?
No. I was just going to agree. Yeah, no, it's very disrespectful. It's the usual, the trolling for votes, and they have people coming out, Congress people and so forth, saying, please vote from overseas, but not one do they ever mention the issues of Americans overseas.
Yeah, it's like
I gotta wonder.
Abused. It's disgusting.
There had to be a constituency for this.
Right? No, there's no constituency. This is like domestic abuse.
All right.
It's like
it's a reverse constituency, like the rest of the tax code.
So
right?
Vicious. And this is what I think. If you're an American abroad listening to this, I mean, there's nothing I can think of that is more disgusting than this DA campaign to get you to vote. Well, agreeing and acknowledging they're ignoring your issues. It is unreal. But anyway, I digress. Next.
All right.
Now, so when we look at this in sort of summary, right? Citizenship taxation, the U.S. tax rate of Americans abroad who have a closer connection are punished. Citizenship non-taxation. Now, these are people who are U.S. tax residents who are not U.S. citizens and are eligible for this break. Now, the next thing we need to talk about, though, is, all right, so this assumes you're in the United States. How are you in the United States? Under what kind of visa connection? Whatever.
Right.
So let's talk about that. And I did not put that in the slides, but let me tell you why I find this so interesting. Canadians can spend up to 180 days in the U.S. just by showing their passport at the border.
So this is great for Canadian. This is great for snowbirds.
They are the principal beneficiaries. Okay, obviously. Now, I don't know the origins of this, if there really was anything rational. But you have these Canadian snowbirds, and this is and there are all kinds of forums that talk about these kinds of issues. So for Canadian snowbirds, right, this is how they can avoid being U.S. tax residents, without making use of the treaty. And I think that a lot do. I mean, there are people who know and understand this stuff. People who sort of specialize in, snowbirdness, this sort of stuff, right? I mean, there's a whole, contingency of people who do that kind of work. Now, it's obviously less relevant for people who can't spend 180 days in the U.S. for any number of reasons. Right. And that would include, visa waiver countries, right? I mean, for certain visas, like for example, I think that that British citizens can only come for like 90 days or something, even with a visa waiver. I'm not 100%, but I think that's the answer. Obviously, or maybe they can then extend it. I don't know. But I mean, the point is that for Canadians, it is real simple. Here's my passport, boom, and they can stay up to 180 days. Okay. They're going to be the principal beneficiaries of this. Now, the other type of people who have the H1, H2 visas, right? Or B1, B2.
Okay.
Which ones? I always get the business and tourism visa. I think they're B1, B2, whatever they are, right? Now, it can take a long time to get that kind of visa. I mean, some places, the waiting period is like a year. But once you got that, that gives you easy in and out. But the point here is that it's not like this is going to apply to everybody who's a non-citizen, right? Then we sort of, we were sort of punted back into the immigration side of this. What right do you have to be in the United States? But the point is that what is clear is this is an unbelievable benefit for Canadians, okay? Now, if you're not eligible for the closer connection test, meaning, for example, you spend 183 days in the United States, then the next step would be to use the treaty tiebreak provision, right, independently to be treated as a tax residency of Canada. But that's not as good, okay, because that may not get you out of all the information returns and things like that. It may not get you out of having to file tax returns, etc.
Okay. So
now, you are supposed to file an 8840. I don't actually read that, though. I don't read the statute as saying that you're required to file an 8840 to get the benefit of this. I think that's maybe an open question. Go back to the statute. Put the slides back up. Let's just see that. I mean, I think maybe you should.
Yeah, you do it right. A good idea to do it. So let me get that page back up there. So where is that here?
Maybe there's something in the regulation. Let me see. Exception.
Is that what we're looking for?
Less than
previous, or no? Wait, it's right here. Here we go. Right.
No. Next.
Forward.
Go forward. Yeah.
All right. There's our
exception.
This right here.
All right.
You got it?
Well, you read this. I'm not sure how to read this. I mean, the regs may say something about this. Notice the way this is phrased. It's established for the current year, the individual tax home is defined, interestingly, without regard to the second sentence thereof, in a foreign country, and as a closer connection to the foreign country. It's funny, I don't know what the words is established applies to, but what I don't see in there is anything that requires, the filing of an 8840. It may. If you want to pull up the regulations quickly, we could probably, if you want to, we could probably see if there's anything in the regs. I did look at them, but I don't remember the answer to that question.
I think like anything, whatever it is. It's
anyway, that's aside. That's
this is what I want to say. As I'm listening to John, I didn't realize this, but Canada has been really great for a lot of things. I got to say, we have John Candy, Canadian. I mean, come on, there's a national treasure. Rush, one of the greatest trios of all time, and now I am thinking,
Anthony, are
the
you
greatest.
Are you a Rush fan?
I am a Rush. Oh, of course I am.
I got to tell you something. Rush used to play at my high school before they hit the big time.
Really?
Oh my God.
Wow.
I'll say it again.
I love
I know
Rush.
I'm really dating myself now, but I don't.
Right. Well, I mean, just think about it. I mean, Canada is a fantastic, I mean, Canada is a country that can create Rush. Then I'm also, I'm thinking Canada might actually have the absolute best citizenship in the world, because that citizenship allows you to live in the United States 180 in this case, 180 days, completely tax-free to the US. And so I'm really thinking that, maybe it's everybody who wants to move to America. No, stop, stupid. Stop right there. No. You don't want American citizenship. You want Canadian citizenship, because now suppose, because this is what I'm thinking of, if you have Canadian citizenship and you live, say, in Malta, you're not taxed on your worldwide income if you're living in Malta. Is that correct, John?
If
you're living outside of Canada,
tax resident of Canada, Canada has residence-based taxation, right? So
right.
You can never tax residency.
Right. So,
but you can do it. It doesn't have citizenship taxation.
Right. So hey, I'm looking to, my kids are going to go to America and I want to become a U.S. person. I want to live in the U.S. For a good part of the year. And so people would naturally go, it's like, oh, okay, I guess I should look to see if there's an investor visa out there. Hey, how can I get into the U.S.? Well, actually, it's like, no. Go get your Canadian citizenship. Don't live in Canada, but get your Canadian citizenship, which gives you the right to live in the U.S. 180 days a year. And you don't have to pay taxes in Canada, and you don't have to pay taxes in the U.S. And you're living, in the U.S. for half the year, free of all the nonsense that everyone else has to deal with. I think you have hacked the system there. And I think Canada is really should be, we should be probably getting more clients for you, John. Would you not say?
It's interesting, because it does seem to me, I mean, I've never sat down with somebody and said, how do we achieve this? But it does seem to me that, this opens up an opportunity that, I hadn't consciously realized till maybe, before I got the idea for this. But let me tell you, one of the reasons why I was thinking about this is that, we got the whole citizenship taxation problem, and there are people who. Let me put it this way, okay? This is clearly costing Treasury money to be giving these people this, this exemption, right? Clearly. So I don't know. Could this possibly be a revenue offset to get rid of this? To change other kinds of laws. I mean, I think this is absolutely outrageous.
It is, but hey, if we could take advantage of it,
I'm happy for the people who benefit from it. Okay,
right?
But it is an unbelievably unjust crime.
Right. It is unbelievably unjust.
Even by U.S. standards, it's unbelievable. Okay, and while the world is thinking about tax reform, I think that for the U.S., the whole issue of tax residency needs to be reconsidered from the ground up. And I don't see any reason. Well, I mean, I understand the states of Florida and Arizona probably like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping the property values up there, right? I mean, it can't really.
Yeah. Attracts people. But at some point in tax policy, I think that the issue of basic fairness has got to come into this, okay? And this is, when you consider the fact that a Canadian can hang out in Florida for 180 days a year, avoid the whole thing, because they have a closer connection to Canada But a Florida native who lives in, say, France, who never comes to the United States, doesn't have this benefit. It is so indescribably unjust. And it can only be justified through some kind of economic benefit to, Florida, Arizona, or something like that. So this is why I thought this would be, a very interesting topic, because I have never actually had this. This is the first discussion I've ever had with anybody about this, interestingly. All the people I know, all these, I know so many people, who are, generally in this ecosystem, and I've never had a discussion about this. So it's just one of these things that's been kind of sitting there. Some people benefit from it. It's so discriminatory.
It's so discriminatory. It is so discriminatory. And again, and it's not only does it, it's discriminatory on your basis of your U.S. citizenship, and it's also discriminatory on the basis of whatever your other citizenship is. That is, Canadian citizens clearly have a great advantage over many other.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, that becomes a function of the immigration laws, et cetera. But I mean, what's unbelievable is, the number of hours in my life I've thought about tax residency, and this is a relatively recent sort of, addition to my brain on this. I've been aware of it, peripherally for years, but, never really thought about it contextually. But when I look at this, I think that this is one of the most outrageous provisions that I've ever seen anywhere, because this is not, sort of tweaking the substantial presence test, right? For everybody. This is, buddy, you're a tax resident under our rules. You're a tax resident. But you know what? We're going to give you a break. We're going to give you a break.
All right, John, I have a question for you. How hard would it be for me to get Canadian citizenship? Is it a difficult thing?
No. Well, yes and no. I think you could do it. You've got to get permanent residence in Canada first. Okay. I know you can do that in various ways. I don't know what your marital status is, but you might consider that. Okay.
It's just me right now.
Yeah. Well, then, look north of the border. Okay. So the first step is becoming a permanent resident. If you don't want to get into that, again, which could understand, I suppose, but there are various ways. For example, shouldn't IRS Medic be just international? Can it really call itself a country without IRS Medic in it or something?
There you go. Right.
Maybe
every country needs IRS Medic. Yeah, you have to be right about that. Really, but I'm joking, but I'm not. But it seems like this could be, getting Canadian citizenship could really be a great strategy if you want to live in the United States, not full time, but you want to live in the United States enough to, enjoy Florida, enjoy your kids in college or whatever.
Yeah, but remember, that a Canadian can't go to the United States, under the 6-month thing and start setting up businesses and work and stuff like that. Remember that. Okay. This applies on, you need another visa for that. This applies only to a certain kind of person. Okay. And I think the issue is not so much who it applies to, because that's more of an immigration issue. From my point of view, the issue is whether the fact that this exists at all. It's so outrageous and discriminatory. And, when the Democrats are out saying, oh, come on, please vote, you might ask them, well, talk to me about, how come I have a closer connection, to France? How come I have to pay U.S. taxes? My friend in Canada doesn't
have to, right?
Exactly.
Amazing. All right. Well, John, I want to thank you for, I think you were the one who suggested this podcast. I want to thank you so much.
It's just quite enlightening.
Mind blowing. And I think, really mind blowing. And this is always the thing, we have these discussions and at the end of today, it's like, I think I know tax, right? I think I know tax. And then as we dig deep, look at the law and we find just the most shocking, brazen, insane things that clearly clear. I mean, what person who votes would vote to be subject to any of this? And the answer is nobody, right? Nobody voted for this because our tax laws don't come from the people. They actually come from, well, sometimes sources we don't know, but certainly not the American people. And I mean, we are held hostage by this thing. I mean, incredibly, right? And we're just trying to do the best with it. So before we sign off, do you want to, John? Do you want to talk about the treaty tiebreaker next time, or go ahead? I'll let you.
Okay, before we go, you said something really, really interesting here, and I want to get Keith's comment on this at all. You said something to the effect of, well, we think we know tax or whatever, right? And see, when you say we think we know tax, right? That's sort of, how do the tax rules work, calculate tax, reporting requirements, stuff like that. That's a very different thing. In other words, that's the what, how tax works. That's not the same thing as the who.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Notice we're over to the who. Now, the reason I mention that again here on this podcast is because the whole debate for Americans abroad is, should they be focusing on the who, that is severing citizenship from tax residency, or the what, how people. My point, this is just one more example why the energy has got to be on the who.
Yeah. Can you ask me the question you want to ask? Because I'm going to have to get going. What would you like to ask me, John?
Oh, just that. I mean, do you see sort of the correlation between this discussion and the whole debate that's going on, among Americans abroad, who are dividing and conquering themselves? We're saying, well, we want to focus on the what. We just want less onerous tax rules, right?
Right. Versus the who.
That's not going to do anything in the long run. And this explains why the focus should be on the who, because what we've talked about today is not how people are taxed, but how people can get out of being subject to tax at all, right?
Right. I agree. Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is really, really important. And this is a very, very good example, again, of why the goal needs to be a complete severance of citizenship from tax residency, not screwing around with, foreign earned income exclusion, this, that, and the other thing, right? But there you go. The closer exemption carve out.
Amazing.
Unless you're applying for a green card, in which we have an exception, a carve out to the carve out.
Carve out to the carve out. To the carve out.
Life is nothing for American citizens, Anthony. Life is nothing but a series of carve outs.
And you just see what you're left with, right? Maybe you're left with something, maybe not. You never know, right? So with that, I want to thank Keith for joining us today. If these issues of international taxation are affecting you as a U.S. person, especially if you live overseas and you're wondering what you should do, if you should come clean with the IRS or if you should do something else, a great place to start is with Keith Redmond. He's a Consulate II advocate for Americans overseas, accidental Americans. You could reach out to him and just start a conversation. He can just give you some input on what the world is doing, right, Keith?
Right. And we sit down, we explore all the options.
There we go.
And we go through a risk assessment of each of those options.
Right. And Keith, right, it's a case by case. There is no cookie cutter approach.
Yeah. It's case by case.
It's case by case. And I hope that is that point's been made clear today. How much is it case by case, right? Well, we just went over that. How much case by case, where a matter of hours can affect, really, John, right? A matter of hours, right? It's like it gets down to that. Well, that was one expensive hour, right? Because you went over that amount. You could have the most expensive hour of your life by staying in the U.S. just that little bit of time to now make yourself a tax resident. So it's pretty crazy. John, before we go, what do you want to cover next time? And I'm just wondering, do you think treaty tiebreakers would be a good segue to this, or is that enough? Is that enough to talk about the treaty tiebreakers?
No, we haven't covered treaty tiebreakers. I don't know if I want to do that one next. I don't know that one. That is going to maybe. I don't know. When are we doing our next podcast?
I think next week. I'm going to be busy on
I don't know. Let's figure it out over the next.
All right, we'll figure it out. If you have an idea,
I discovered an amazing thing. This is just mind blowing. About the provision in the U.S.-Mexico tax treaty. Okay, that has a direct bearing on the Reed Amendment. maybe we'll do. Anyway, I don't know. I'll think about it. We'll figure something out.
Well,
Anyway.
it wouldn't be bad. It wouldn't be bad to have Mexico. Mexico is a great. A lot of people want to go there, and a lot of people are having the same questions. And I know a few clients who are going to probably email me after this. Hey, Anthony, what about Mexico? What about?
Here's
Mexico?
the thing, Anthony. It is very, very clear, okay, that immigrants, U.S. immigrants, who are the most badly treated, they've got to renounce. Okay,
Yeah.
Believe me, if they don't, they are going to regret it. And those who are Canadians, look at that. Look at what we've talked about today. I mean, do you realize that dual Canada U.S. citizens who renounce U.S. citizenship will get far better treatment in the United States without the U.S. citizenship?
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
It's amazing. Renounce your citizenship for better. Yeah.
Is there a country that seems to have such a hatred for its own citizens?
The United States is really superlative. It's really superlative, all the while claiming that, that we're representing, this is a democracy BS, and it's clearly not. I mean, no one, again, would vote to be, yes, punish me harder than you will punish the foreigner, right? So it's pretty ridiculous. All right, with that, it is ridiculous. All right, so if you are thinking about renouncing your U.S. citizenship, reach out to the great John Richardson. You can reach him to CitizenshipSolutions@protonmail.com. If you are interested in some questions on your Form 8840, we have done them. I have come across them with my since I've joined Thabot and Partners. Now we're getting a little bit more of a different client than we used to have. So I have seen them. We have done them, and we're helping out a different type of client than we have. In addition, a lot of non-residents now that we have. So if you're a non-resident and you're looking to file 1040 NR, you're whatever, reach out to us. You can go to irsmedic.com/offshore, schedule time to speak with us, and that will take care of today. I think John, I think this is one of our greatest ever. I really want to thank you. It was incredibly illuminating, and I think really doing a lot of good for a lot of people, explaining what it truly is, and digging into the weeds where, a lot of the tax industry, no one really wants to go in here. They just want you to, again, pay them to do the math for them, and don't ask too many questions, I suppose. Don't ask too many questions like, what's the actual law? So that's where it's pretty focused. And so,
well,
really,
I don't think it's the laws. I don't think it's a complicated provision of law at all. Okay. But what I do think is that it really, really underscores the incredible unfairness to Americans abroad. I mean, obviously, they have a closer connection to their country of residence than some Canadian who spends 180 days in the United States. I mean, it is so absurd. There's no way to justify this. And this is an election, and people need to not cast their vote for the people who cause this stuff and perpetuate it.
Yeah.
Ignore it when asking for your vote.
There you go.
Okay. I mean, I wonder, is there something about the American psyche where because the U.S. government hates U.S. citizens, they hate themselves too?
Yeah, no, that's part of I do believe that's part of the PSYOP of the IRS. I believe the IRS is a revenue raising agency, or it's a asset confiscation and discretion agency disguised as a legitimate revenue raising agency. We're so far beyond anything of what it's supposed to be. It's just, and that the complications, the uncertainty are all designed to bring us down, to keep us down, to suppress us. This is a clear. I mean, what more evidence do you need that this is a clear PSYOP designed to destroy us, designed to divide us? It rewards people who aren't U.S. citizens, and it punishes those who are U.S. citizens the most. That's the truth about the U.S. tax system.
That is the truth.
All right, with that, hopefully. So with that, have a great day as we join it. But hey, look, the truth now. We're getting closer to the truth. So wonderful. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you all for your comments. Really appreciate the robust discussion that we had. This is Anthony Parent for Keith Redmond, John Richardson. I want to thank you for watching.